Hello, and welcome to Tuesday's Tales. Today we have our options for today: Chrysanthemum and the Berenstain Bears' Too Much Vacation. Now, this one kind of went, it was touch and go for a while. I wasn't sure which one was going to win until about like 4 minutes ago. that's like, I had to like check and double check. But this book is our winner for today. And I love this book for a lot of reasons. One of them, this guy, if you're a fan of one of my favorite books, Lily's Purple Plastic Purse, he is the author of that book. And that book is awesome. And I love this book because it's about people with interesting names and how it's awesome to embrace who you are. Being a person with a long name, such as myself, you go through that whole like thing where, small town, everybody's related to everybody. I'm not. My family's all in Greenville or Hendersonville, and my last name's like Smith there. Not here. No offense to people named Smith here, but y'all are all related to each other. Sorry. But this book is great, and I actually had a friend of mine from college that mentioned today, she said that this book really meant a lot to her, having a name that was spelled differently than the way other people spelled it, and it meant a lot to her, and it helped her feel good about herself. And that made me glad. That made me really glad when I saw that. So, let's get started. Chrysanthemum by Kevin Henkes, or Henkes, probably Henkes, published by Greenwillow Books. The day she was born was the happiest day in her parents' lives. "She's perfect," said her mother. "Absolutely," said her father. And she was. She was absolutely perfect. Ew, Bo. That's cute. "Her name must be everything she is," said her mother. "Her name must be absolutely perfect," said her father. And it was. Chrysanthemum. Her parents named her Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum grew and grew and grew. And when she was old enough to appreciate it, Chrysanthemum loved her name. I love her cat bike. That's awesome. And I love her little red boots. They're so cute. This book is ridiculously adorable. She loved the way it sounded when her mother woke her up. She loved the way it sounded when her father called her for dinner. And she loved the way it sounded when she whispered it to herself in the bathroom mirror. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum loved the way her name looked when it was written with ink on an envelope. She loved the way it looked when it was written with icing on her birthday cake. And she loved the way it looked when she wrote it herself with her fat orange crayon. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Now, I know, this is all about appreciating your name, but the person that wrote this and spelled it correctly the first time, go them. Sometimes that's hard. Chrysanthemum thought her name was absolutely perfect. And then she started school. On the first day, Chrysanthemum wore her sunniest dress and her brightest smile. She ran all the way. "Hooray!" said Chrysanthemum. "School!" But when Mrs. Chudd took roll call, Not road call. That sounds like roadkill. Everyone giggled upon hearing Chrysanthemum's name. Let's see who was in her class. Dawn, Eve, Lois, Al, Les, Kay, Max, Sue, Bill, Pat, Tom, Sam, Ken, Joe, Rita, Victoria, and Chrysanthemum. Now, once again, I can relate Chrysanthemum because sometimes my name doesn't fit on the line on the paper. I had to learn to write smaller. You can do it. It's so long, said Joe. It scarcely fits on your name tag, said Rita, pointing. I'm named after my grandmother, said Victoria. You're named after a flower. Are you serious, Victoria? Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and informed Mrs. Chudd that Chrysanthemum's name was spelled with 13 letters. That's exactly half as many letters as there are in the entire alphabet, Victoria explained. Aren't you supposed to be taking a nap? Thank you for sharing that with us, Victoria, said Mrs. Chudd. Now put your head down. If I had a name like yours, I'd change it, Victoria said, as the students lined up to go home. I wish I could, thought Chrysanthemum miserably. Welcome home, said her mother. Welcome home, said her father. School's no place for me, said Chrysanthemum. My name is too long. It scarcely fits on my name tag, and I'm named after a flower. Oh, pish, said her mother. Your name is beautiful, and precious, and priceless, and fascinating, and winsome, said her father. Yes, it is everything you are, said her mother. Absolutely perfect, said her father. Now those are some good parents right there. Chrysanthemum felt much better after her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with ketchup, and an evening filled with hugs and kisses and parcheesi. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that her name was Jane. It was an extremely pleasant dream. The next morning, Chrysanthemum wore her most comfortable jumper. She walked to school as slowly as she could. She dragged her feet in the dirt. Chrysanthemum, 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 she wrote. She even looks like a flower, Victoria said, as Chrysanthemum entered the playground. Let's pick her, said Rita, pointing. Let's smell her, said Joe. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. Not nice. Not nice. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hands and said, Chrysanthemum is a flower. It lives in a garden with worms and other dirty things. Thank you for sharing that with us, Victoria, said Mrs. Chudd. Now put your head down. I just cannot believe your name, Victoria said as the students lined up to go home. Neither can I, thought Chrysanthemum miserably. Welcome "Welcome home," said her mother. "Welcome home," said her father. "School is no place for me," said Chrysanthemum. "They said I even look like a flower. They pretended to pick me and smell me." "Oh, pish," said her mother. "They're just jealous, and envious, and begrudging, and discontented, and jaundiced," said her father. "Who wouldn't be jealous of a name like yours?" said her mother. "After all, it's absolutely perfect," said her father. Chrysanthemum felt a trifle better after her favorite dessert, chocolate cake with buttercream frosting, and another evening filled with hugs and kisses and parcheesi. Her father must be a psychiatrist. That's fun. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that she really was a chrysanthemum. She sprouted leaves and petals. Victoria picked her and plucked the leaves and petals one by one until there was nothing left but a scrawny stem. It was the worst nightmare of Chrysanthemum's life. Chrysanthemum wore her outfit with 7 pockets the next morning. She loaded the pockets with her most prized possessions and her good luck charms. Chrysanthemum took the longest route possible to school. She stopped and stared at each and every flower. "Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum," the flowers seemed to say. That morning, the students were introduced to Mrs. Twinkle, the music teacher. Her voice was like something out of a dream, as was everything else about her. The students were speechless. They thought Mrs. Twinkle was an indescribable wonder. They went out of their way to make a nice impression. Mrs. Twinkle led the students in scales. Then she assigned roles for the class musicale. Victoria was chosen as the dainty fairy queen, of course. Rita was chosen as the spiffy butterfly princess. Jo was chosen as the all-important pixie messenger. And Chrysanthemum was chosen as a daisy. "Chrysanthemum's a daisy, chrysanthemum's a daisy," Jo, Rita, and Victoria chanted, thinking it was wildly funny. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. "What's so humorous?" asked Mrs. Twinkle. "Chrysanthemum," was the answer. "Her name is so long," said Jo. "It scarcely fits on her name tag," said Rita, pointing. "I'm named after my grandmother," said Victoria. "She's named after a flower." Okay, no, that's not nice. But she's not nice either. "My name is long," said Mrs. Twinkle. "It is," said Jo. "My name would scarcely fit on a name tag," says Mrs. Twinkle. "It would," said Rita, pointing. "And," said Mrs. Twinkle, "I'm named after a flower, too." "You are?" said Victoria. "Yes," said Mrs. Twinkle. "My name is Delphinium." That's a real flower. I looked it up. Delphinium Twinkle. And if my baby is a girl, I'm considering Chrysanthemum as a name. I think it's absolutely perfect. Chrysanthemum could scarcely believe her ears. She blushed, she beamed, she bloomed. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Jo, Rita, and Victoria looked at Chrysanthemum longingly. "Call me Marigold," said Jo. "I'm Carnation," said Rita, pointing. "My name is Lily of the Valley," said Victoria. Chrysanthemum did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She knew it. Epilogue. Overall, the class musicale was a huge success. Chrysanthemum was absolutely perfect as a daisy. Victoria made the only mistake. She completely forgot her lines as the dainty fairy queen. Chrysanthemum thought it was wildly funny, and she giggled through the entire dance of the flowers. Eventually, Mrs. Twinkle gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and of course, she named her Chrysanthemum. The end. Oh, that's a nice story. All right. Today, our Bible story is about Moses. Now, my kids from Bible school know that we had been talking about Moses the last time that we were together. And it's in the Jesus Storybook Bible, which I highly recommend. God to the rescue. And grown-ups, if you want to check your Bible, that's Exodus 3 through 13. Joseph and his brothers grew old and died. Now that's Joseph, coat of many colors guy, just to catch you up. But their children's children stayed on in Egypt, where they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule, but this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph and didn't like God's people. He made them into his slaves and beat them and made them work harder and harder. God's people cried out to God to rescue them, and God heard them. He remembered his promise to Abraham. He would look after his people. He would find a way to set them free. One day, Moses was looking after sheep when something caught his eye. A bush was behaving very oddly. It was flickering with flames, but its leaves weren't burning up. He took a closer look. "Moses!" boomed a big voice. Moses leapt back. The bush was talking to him. "I have heard my people's cries," God said. "I have seen their tears, so I have come down to rescue them. Go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go free." Moses was afraid, but God said, "I will be with you." That's the short version. Moses had about 50,000 excuses, but you get the idea. So, Moses went to Pharaoh. "Pharaoh," Moses began. "God says." "God?" said Pharaoh. "Never heard of him." Moses kept going. "God says, let his people go free." "Why should I?" Pharaoh said. "Don't want to." "Won't." So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. No one could drink the water. But still Pharaoh would not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping. In your bed frogs, in your hair frogs, in your soup frogs, all over everywhere frogs. Pharaoh screamed, "Make them go away! Then your people can go." So God took the frogs away. Yeah, now I like one or two frogs. Yeah. But Pharaoh changed his mind. "You can't go," he said. Then God sent zillions of gnats. But still Pharaoh said, "No." So then God sent swarms of flies. Flies buzzing in your eyes, flies. And after that, sickness and horrible boils and huge hailstones and a storm of locusts, then darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation and everything, was coming undone, falling it back into darkness and emptiness and nothingness. That Pharaoh, he's just sitting there pouting. But each time Pharaoh said, "Make them stop, and then I'll let them go." And each time when God made it stop, Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "Actually, no, you can't go." Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, "Obey God, or he will have to send the worst thing of all." Pharaoh just laughed. So God said, "The oldest boy in each family of Egypt must die, but my people will be safe." God told his people to take their best lamb, to kill it, and to put some of its blood on their front doors. "When God passes over your house," Moses explained, "God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you." That night, it was just as God had said. Suddenly, piercing the darkness, echoing down the corridors of the palace, came a blood-curdling scream. Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did just what God said. "Get out!" Pharaoh shouted. "Just go!" And so, that very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come down once more to rescue his people. But this time, God was going to set them free forever and ever. The end. I'm so glad that y'all were able to hop online and enjoy story time with us. It's definitely one of my favorite things out of my week. And we have 2 stories for next week. Alright, it's cats versus dogs again, but this time I picked a dog book and a cat book that before I saw them at the library, I had never heard of them before. And so you might not have heard of them before either, but I'm sure they're both going to be very funny. Alright, our dog book is called Floaty, and our cat book is called Catnit. So, these are our choices for next week, cat or dog. You decide. And I'll see you next week right here on Facebook Live for Tuesday's Tales.